left to the right. Yeah, we go from left to the right. Yeah. So everyone gets a direct line of sight. Ready, guys? Pretty good? Hi. Get a wave. It's a shame. Next time. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President, any statement on why you're leaving the G7 early for Washington?
Well, I have to be back. Very important. I want to just thank our great host. He did a fantastic job. Thank you in Canada. But you probably see what I see, and I have to be back as soon as I can. I'm going to have dinner with these wonderful leaders, and then I get on the plane. I have to be back early.
Have you directed the National Security Council?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it. And I think we got a lot done. Really a lot done. In fact, UK, we signed a big trade deal today, and we're working on others. But we had just a really great relationship with everybody, and it's really nice. I wish I could stay for tomorrow, but they understand. This is
there a reason,
big,
Mr. President, that you can't do your business
you have
from
questions
here?
for anybody else?
Is there a reason you can't do your business
Is there a reason you can't do your business from here, sir?
We've got a bit more work to do, so we'll go do it over
Mr.
dinner.
Carney,
But
have you
thank you
been
very much.
briefed on this?
I'm very grateful for the president's presence, his contributions, and I fully understand why.
We'll see
why
you
he
on the
must
plane.
return. Okay.
We'll see you on
Take
the
care.
plane.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, we just joined that there where the leaders, the G7 leaders, stood for the traditional family photo. Donald Trump holding that space, clearly holding that as questions were fired. Two of the leaders, including Friedrich Merz, who had walked off, coming back on to the stage as Trump spoke about the reason why he was leaving the G7 summit. Of course, ongoing situations in the Middle East, which we have been discussing all night into the morning, and Trump making it clear that he had to get back, also acknowledging the work that had been done and acknowledging that a meal would be had with the leaders after this traditional family photo. Mark Carney spoke briefly as well before the leaders exited the stage. But this news that Donald Trump is leaving is a surprise. But given the situation, it is understandable. And I'm sure discussions were had with the other world leaders about the need to resolve this ongoing situation. That there has been unity. We've had Keir Starmer talk about unity over the Iranian nuclear issue, a contentious issue, but one that he says, Keir Starmer, that all the leaders are in agreement over, that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. This amid reports that Iranian uranium enrichment has reached 60%, triggering, of course, after a deal between the US and Iran seemed distant, those large-scale Israeli attacks on Iranian infrastructure. Trump leaving, and he has requested that the National Security Council be prepared in the Situation Room for when he arrives back tonight. That, of course, in North America. If you join us in the morning in India or at other points of the day across the world, the summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, Canada is ongoing. Further world leaders from invitee nations, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, new South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung, who was only elected on the 3rd of June, also visiting the Brazilian leader Lula da Silva and Mexican President Claudia Scheinbaum. Just to reiterate some of the comments Trump made there after this family photo of the G7 leaders. Trump stating, "I have to be back early for obvious reasons." He has to be back, in his words, to Washington as soon as I can. This comes after a recent development as well from the Chinese embassy within Israel, telling citizens to leave by land towards Jordan. We spoke with our guest and geopolitical expert, Daniel Wagner, who explained that that is one of the only safe ways to leave Israel at the moment. But the timing comes as the embassy in Israel, the Chinese embassy in Israel, warns that the situation has become more severe. Another update to bring you as we show you these live visuals from Kananaskis in the Rockies of Canada in Alberta. That sirens have been sounded once again across Tel Aviv and central Israel after a reported further missile fire from Iran. This has been a regular update that we have been bringing you through the night. Iran promising to unleash a historic amount of missiles on Israel in retaliation. We're going to bring in Terry Milevsky now, who is a former correspondent of CBC and an author who is joining us from Ottawa. Terry, thank you ever so much for being here. We have to first look at the news that first came from the White House, but has now been confirmed by Donald Trump as this family photo ended and reporters got in their questions. Those reporters doing their jobs and trying to get Trump's attention, which he held. But Trump leaving amid the uncertainty in the Middle East. How significant is this, Terry?
Well, obviously it's intended to be significant. It's a dramatic move which catches the world's attention. It's typical of Trump. But let's remember that if he had stayed, it's not like as though he was going to sign on with the other leaders in a joint statement going on in the Middle East, in Iran and in Israel. Mark Carney, in fact, had already announced a couple of days ago, you know what, we're going to give up. We're not going to get hung up trying to make a joint statement. It's probably not going to happen. Let's just forget the joint statement. Not going to happen. And so then Trump said, well, I'm not going to sign it anyway. When the German chancellor said, well, we're going to do a statement anyway, with or without whoever, which a peace. It wasn't very controversial. That's the point, to both Iran and Israel to de-escalate their work. And Trump had already said, I don't have anything to do with that, thanks, I'm out of here. So, so much for the so-called Western alliance. Trump has already driven it into the ground, and now he's just giving it one more stomp.
Yes, well, some would argue, including some in America, that Trump might be the only one that holds the keys to this situation, given his alliance with Israel, given the support that he has shown Israel in the face of condemnation and from other world leaders, including, of course, those who are at the G7 summit. We've heard from the UK, from France and other nations, of course, condemnation over the situation in in Gaza with Israel and Hamas. But do you think Trump really can get a deal done as he has said? Is there a possibility for de-escalation, or is this potentially a move towards US military involvement in this conflict?
Well, he does have quite the thought, doesn't he, of calling for peace and not getting it. He's been calling on Vladimir Putin for more than a year. That's not going anywhere. It's not as though people spring to attend when he speaks. People know, of course, that tomorrow he'll probably say something different. So it's a problem, and I don't think that anyone in the Middle East is waiting to see if the G7 produces a statement that has any impact, or whether Trump produces a statement that has such an impact. However, we also have to remember that nobody else has what Israel needs if it really wants to finish off the Iranian nuclear program, which means penetrating bombs, bunker buster bombs that Israel doesn't have, nobody has, except for the Americans. If the Americans are now planning or thinking of entering this conflict in force and for a purpose, namely to finish off the Iranian regime as it stands now, still today, then that bringing one of those bunker busters or a whole bunch of them to slam into that mountain at Fordow and finish off the nuclear program in Iran, that would eclipse any news that the other members of the Western so-called alliance might produce, because they've jointly called for peace.
Yes, Terry, stay with us. I'm now going to bring in John Rosamondo, who is the president of Viking Research Associates. He is joining us from Washington, D.C. John, as always, thank you for joining us. Let's look at this announcement that Trump has requested the National Security Committee to be prepared in the Situation Room for his arrival when he is back in the United States, back in Washington, after this meal that he said he will have with the leaders. How significant is a meeting of this kind?
Well, I think it's kind of an important thing, because the National Security Council is the chief deciding body of the United States government. Includes, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, CIA, Defense. Tulsi Gabbard, the head of Director of National Intelligence, to decide a path forward. I mean, President Trump came out swinging against the isolationists in his coalition, saying to Tucker Carlson, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So I think that's significant. You've had reports on acts of tankers and other warplanes flying to Europe, where they could be in a standby. And there's unconfirmed reports about Al-Udeid in Qatar potentially being used against Tehran. And now you also have the issue that the Israelis have gained air supremacy over Iran. So a lot is moving very fast.
Yes, absolutely. A lot is moving fast and a lot is developing. Of course, developments in Canada at this G7 summit, but there are also developments continuing to come through in the Middle East as well. Just to bring you into the context of what is happening, if you are just joining us this morning or tonight, depending on where you are in the world, but there have been persistent strikes from Iran over Israel, air raid sirens on and off through the night. This after Iran promised an unprecedented amount of strikes on Israel. Israeli military action in Iran also reported, we brought you that update a short while ago, that somebody had been killed after a state TV building was targeted. Also blasts heard across Tehran. And John, given that air superiority that Israel now have in Tehran, but also the edge that Israel have, given the technology and military assets at their disposal, is this now just a one-way road down the path which Israel choose, however far that will go, based on potential conversations with the United States and geopolitical calls for a ceasefire?
Well, let's put it this way. Tehran does not hold a lot of cards. I mean, I talked with an Iranian friend earlier this evening who was in communication with her friends inside Iran, and they're elated about the destruction of the Arab broadcaster, which is the main propaganda channel of the regime. One person told this friend that they would love to see a statue of Netanyahu to congratulate him for freeing the Iranian people. I mean, this is sort of a widespread sentiment. The Iranians, hate this regime. I mean, it's significant that the individuals who carried out the attacks for Israel inside Israel were reputedly members of the Iranian Air Force. So I think that the fact that the Iranian president is saying we need a ceasefire shows that they're weak. They realize they've overplayed their hand. The number of missiles flying to Tel Aviv is a fraction of what it had been in the past few days. The Israelis have managed to degrade Iran's ability to shoot missiles at their country, and there is no way that this regime survives in the long term, as far as I can tell.
Yes, John, also stay with us, please. I do have another update to bring. We reported a short while ago that air raid sirens were heard over Tel Aviv and also in central Israel. An update now from the Israeli military instructing the public it is safe to leave protected shelters, signalling that the threat from current Iranian missile attacks is over for now. John, coming back to you, this is something that we have heard throughout the night. Warnings, sirens, people and civilians being sent to bunkers in the face of further Iranian attacks. And then a short while later, the all clear. Is this just a signal of the fact that Israel have superiority in this war? They are able to limit the damage, though there have been deaths reported in the country. They are able to limit the damage that these Iranian strikes can carry out, in contrast to the devastation that they have caused to military and nuclear facilities inside of Iran.
Absolutely. I mean, let's put it this way. The Israelis have been planning for this for 20 years. So they've thought through probably every contingency. They've probably war gamed the whole thing to death. And the Iranian regime put all of its eggs into proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas, thinking that they would neutralize Israel. The Israelis have gained supremacy in such short order. I mean, it's been less than 4 days. I mean, look at how long it took the U.S. when it invaded Iraq to gain supremacy. It took an entire month. So this is just remarkable how fast the Israelis are working. And the biggest asset that the Israelis have is the Iranian people themselves.
Yes, Terry, I'm going to come back to you, and I want to keep our focus on the Middle East, but also look at the ongoing G7 summit. This conflict between Israel and Iran does have economic ramifications as well. We've seen fluctuation in the price of oil being one key factor, but also threats from Iran on Western shipping. We know the impact from one of their proxy groups, the Houthis, on Red Sea shipping has had a massive impact. How destabilizing is this conflict for global economics? And do you think this is going to be another point of discussion that we raised now without Donald Trump at the summit in Alberta?
Yes, and his destabilizing influence remains, of course, at the G7. There was a tremendous amount of nervousness even going in, of course, because in Canada, for example, we're very upset about the tariffs. Well, now we're welcoming dozens and dozens of finance ministers, presidents and prime ministers who are experiencing just the same or worse. And so what are we going to do about it? We're all plotting, and this began before the summit, of course, with Mark Carney well aware of it and egging him on. They've all started to try to figure out ways to get around the United States. Carney has been telling us in Canada, for example, that we're just going to have to accept that the old relationship, the reliance on the United States as the guarantor, and stability and the rules-based order that they led for the past 80 years on. It's over. That's we're going to have to forget that and find our own way. They can go their way, we'll go ours. He was pretty straightforward about that, and it helped him win the election, by the way. And I don't think he's alone in that sentiment, and so he is now as you know, invite, for example, Prime Minister Modi of India, with whom Canada has been having tremendous row for the past 2 years over India's alleged assassination of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil who happened to be a Khalistani. The Indians didn't like him. They accused, the Canadians did, the Indians of sending hit squads to Canada. And that hasn't been resolved. Modi accepted the invite, didn't he? So both sides are looking for a way. Look, they have a trade agreement on the back burner already, and it was coming to a boil. They were almost ready to sign it when this row broke out. But now people are looking past this. There's bigger things to talk about, is the bottom line for both sides in that case. And there are many other examples at the G7 summit. Okay, Trump's going home, fine up business, and we may get more done without him than we would have with him.
Yes, I have an update. You mentioned Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi there, and we believe that he is arriving very shortly. His imminent arrival is expected in Canada. We will bring you those visuals as we get them. John, I'll come back to you. And of course, a short while ago, in recent times, of course, tensions between India and Pakistan boiling over after that devastating terror attack in Pelgam in Jammu and Kashmir. Operation Sindoor carried out. There was, of course, a ceasefire struck there. But do you think that there is anything that can be gained from that situation at how quickly a ceasefire was struck and a potential pathway in which these world leaders, including Narendra Modi, once he arrives and is with the G7 leaders, that can be put in place to try and help move this conflict towards a ceasefire?
Well, the difference between India and Pakistan was the United States has strong relations with both countries. The U.S. was able to intervene to stop the Pakistanis and Indians from fighting each other because both sides had nuclear weapons. In this case, the United States, is standing firm with Israel. I think that the G7 countries will follow whatever Trump says. So I think that the end game for the Iranian regime will be the end of its regime.
Yes, and you mentioned the potential end of this Iranian regime. John, I'll stay with you. We have heard from Benjamin Netanyahu several times over the past 24 hours or so, comments about an assassination of Iran's supreme leader Khamenei. Do you think that is a way of unlocking this situation and avoiding further civilian casualty on both sides?
Well, I think that, you take out Khamenei, but then you have people like his son, Moshtaba, and the other members of the Guardian Council. So Israel might end up following a strategy like it did in Lebanon with Hezbollah, where it went and eliminated every person who was a possible successor to Hassan Nasrallah. So I think that at the end game, this will be the end of the regime, and Israel will empower the people of Iran to take it back, the whole country,
Yes. And Terry, coming to you on the same point, but with a slightly different tone, and that is President Donald Trump, who says that he vetoed, the reports suggest that he vetoed the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. What do you think the US reason for that was, given what we've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, somebody somewhere in the White House is thinking about the next phase of this, what happens after this ends. However it ends, what sort of, it's a similar situation what we've just seen in Gaza, for example. What about the day after? And it seems that nobody really thought about who is going to be running Gaza after it's flattened by Israeli Hellfire missiles. So now we've got a similar situation with, it's quite clear that Iran, if it isn't going to be defeated, perhaps it already has been defeated. You've seen what Tehran looks like now. You've seen the relative weakness of the latest wave of drones that was supposed to be the magnificent revenge and retaliation by the Iranian regime, and seem to have had that much effect. So it may even be petering out. Now we're talking about the Americans going to take out the nuclear installation at Fordow. Are they going to drill into the mountain with us? It certainly looks like people are now turning their minds to how they're going to administer this large nation.
Okay, Terry, sorry to interject. I have to take a brief pause as we bring you these live visuals of the plane which is carrying Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. These live visuals we are bringing you from Alberta. Of course, Narendra Modi, one of several leaders from invitee nations. It has just landed and is being driven around. We will stay with these visuals as we wait for the Indian Prime Minister's departure from the plane. Of course, while he has been in the air, there have been countless developments. He would have been expecting to meet President Donald Trump of the United States. Of course, an India-US trade deal is close, we believe. J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, of course, had an Indian state visit, and that deal was discussed. We've had confirmation from diplomats on both sides that that deal is close, and we've already seen at this G7 summit confirmation of one deal that we knew had been close to being completed, with a draft concept agreement in place. That will not be the case now, with President Donald Trump leaving to head back to the White House and to hold that meeting. We are now, I understand, joined by Megha Sharma, our senior executive editor of NewsX World, who is joining us from Calgary in Canada, a short trip away from Kananaskis, where this G7 summit is taking place. Megha, while we show the live visuals, let's talk about the significance of Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India's visit. Of course, an invitee nation, India, and its Prime Minister will be there. But how different will Prime Minister Modi's discussions and conversations be now that we have the news that Donald Trump is leaving and potentially won't be there for Modi's arrival?
Yes, if US President Donald Trump had continued to attend the G7 global summit, then this would have been the first time Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President would have met since the White House visit of the Indian Prime Minister, but also the very first time after India and the United States of America did not see eye to eye, and that particular incident miffed India no end. This is with regards to the military strikes that India had conducted against Pakistan, and after that 4-day operation, there was a ceasefire that had been declared at the behest of Pakistan. Now, US President Donald Trump was quick to take credit for that ceasefire. And while Donald Trump continued to reiterate it at different fora and meetings that he has held and press briefings that he has given, India has put down its foot and said that this was not a mediation done by any third country. A ceasefire was achieved after the Pakistani side called India and appealed for India to stop firing into its territory. So that's the context. But now that the president is going to be leaving because of the escalating situation that is in Iran and Israel, the conflict. There are other issues, other matters, agendas that are of equal significance, if not more. And topmost amongst them is the very fact that the Canadian Prime Minister, the newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney, invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he has accepted that invite and has arrived at the G7 Leaders Summit. This is being looked upon from the Indian side and from the Canadian side as a certain thaw in relationship, an initiation, an initiative being taken by both the countries, the heads of the states, to bring about normalcy in the relationships that have seen the lowest of ebb in the last 1.5 years. So that's grabbed headlines ever since the time Mark Carney gave a call to Prime Minister of India and invited him. And that is also going to be the agenda during the bilateral. So the idea over here, both countries have expressed their hope and desire to have a reset in ties, which is going to bring a positive impact between India and Canada, whether it is the diplomatic relations, bilateral relations, trade and investment, cultural relations, as well as people-to-people connect. And India and Canada are, partners in the truest sense, because there is trade and investment to the tune of $20 billion, which used to be the initial figure, but has reduced to just about $9 billion in the last 1.5 years. And there needs to be some readjustment that needs to be made. Now, India and Canada had been negotiating for a free trade agreement for the longest time, and that also was stalled under the premiership of Justin Trudeau. Again, the issue of, when you talk about education, 41% of the international students who travel to Canada are Indians. So there has been a big setback that the education industry in Canada has suffered, because lesser number of Indian students have been traveling to the country for further education, for higher education. So these are the talks that are going to be, and then the Khalistani issue, you understand how things have played out over the years. We're talking about the Nijjar killing that had happened, and the government under Trudeau had actually accused India of orchestrating that assassination, which India has vehemently denied, rejected all those claims. Also, let's talk about the other bilaterals that the Prime Minister is going to have, because he is going to be meeting his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni. He is going to be meeting, in all likelihood, the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. He is going to be meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron, and interestingly, he will also have a bilateral with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So all of these are aspects that we are going to track very closely, and the outcomes are obviously going to be in front of the media, in front of the public, once these leaders come out and brief the media about what all was talked about and discussed.
Absolutely, Megha. And of course, you spoke about trade there. An India-UK free trade agreement has been agreed in recent times, but Narendra Modi also arrives in Canada off the back of the tragic Air India crash, plane AI-171, of course crashing shortly after taking off in Ahmedabad in Gujarat. UK passengers and UK nationals also on board. So do you expect there to be any discussions on that, and also potential further discussions on safety, specifically looking at Boeing aircraft, given the severe and tragic loss of life?
Yes, there were as many as, I think, if I'm not wrong, 43 British nationals who were on that flight, where just a single survivor came out. There were as many as about 246 7 passengers, including the crew and the captain and the first officers who were flying the jet. And yes, it is unfortunate, and yes, I'm sure, if there is a pull aside or a meet or greet, that is most definitely obviously going to happen. And of course the two leaders are going to touch upon the subject that, what a tragic, gruesome way to die. And investigations are going on. Remember, the United States has sent a Boeing team. Boeing Enterprises has sent a team to investigate and work with the Indian investigative team in this matter, and so has GE, whose engines are used in the Boeing aircraft that crashed just 30 seconds after having taken off. So yeah, that of course, leaders are. There have been. I think discussion in the parliament as well. There was a minute-long silence that was also observed, in condoling the death of these British nationals who were on the flight, the Ahmedabad London Gatwick flight. Unfortunately, the crash happened, and it was just a matter of seconds that so many lives were lost in that accident. But at the same time, when we talk about the trade agreements that have been signed between UK and the United States of America, this happened just a short while ago. In India also is looking, India is also very close to signing a trade agreement, a bilateral trade agreement with the United States of America. There has been the Indian Commerce Minister who has been traveling back and forth. He has met the US Trade Representative Jamieson Greener as well, and both these leaders have spoken about how close they are in signing, in concluding that deal, that agreement, and then that will allow for the waiver of tariffs that Trump had announced to the tune of about 27%. They are at this point in time kept on halt. And hopefully the coming weeks, hopefully before the deadline ends, these tariffs are going to be waived off in exchange for what the Trump administration thinks India would be helpful in lowering those tariffs to allow for United States to sell their goods in India, export their goods in India at a level playing field and at competitive rates. So yeah, those are interesting developments. Unfortunately, it's sad that the US president had to leave the G7 summit in the middle of it all. Had he continued until the day 3, there would most definitely have been a bilateral or a pull aside where the two leaders would have struck a chord on this issue. And Trump has been from day one, he has been speaking about how this G7 summit is mostly about speaking to leaders and having a bilateral with each of them to negotiate the trade terms. So then what better way for these leaders to meet each other than the G7 summit? An opportune time and very, very relevant in wake of the tariff wars that have been imposed and have and countries have had to face severe consequences of it.
Yes, absolutely. Megha Sharma, thank you ever so much for joining us. We now head to Andrew Latham, a professor of international relations, who is joining us from Minnesota. As these invitee nation leaders, Andrew, start to arrive in India, one of those who we expect to be landing at some point is Volodymyr Zelensky. The news of Trump leaving, how much of a blow is that to Zelensky, who is obviously looking at an ongoing war involving his nation?
Well, there's at least 3 issues on the table, one of which is that obviously the Russia-Ukraine war, and there's the Iran-Israel piece, and then there's also the just bigger pictures of tariffs, that whole piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. There are a few other issues as well, but those are the three big ones. So we're going to have to wait and see.
Yes, because Zelensky, of course, has been clear that pressure on Russia is needed to try and push Ukraine's adversary in this war towards a 30-day ceasefire at least. We know that members of the coalition of the willing, including Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Emmanuel Macron, and also Prime Minister Carney, who is hosting this, they have been pushing for as well. Now Trump has left. Do you think this limits Zelensky's ability to push for sanctions on Russia and potentially push Russia towards a ceasefire? Or will these conversations still be had without Trump there and potentially be fruitful for him?
Here's the bottom line, and I don't endorse it, but I think this is just the reality. Ukraine is losing this war. They're not going to recover Crimea. They're not going to recover the 4 Donbass. It's over for them. And the best deal that they can strike is some limited surrender. It pains me to say so. It really does. But as somebody who knows about war, there are winners and losers. And Ukraine has lost this war, not entirely in terms of, being completely subjugated, but they've lost those territories, and they need to come to grips with that.
Yes, Andrew, we're going to, sorry to interject, we're going to take a short break away from discussions as we expect Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to, in a very short time, take the steps down his plane. There has been a congregation of people at the bottom of the steps, as you can see on screen. We're waiting for that door to open and then for the Indian Prime Minister to take steps down before planting his feet on Canadian soil. This meeting for Narendra Modi, of course, now has shifted. There was, of course, clear conversations that all of the world leaders who are arriving now, not members of that group of 7, including Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, Claudia Sheinbaum, among others, they would have been expecting to have conversations with Donald Trump in the face of tariff uncertainty. That deadline is the 8th of July, a 10% blanket tariff being placed on all nations. This, of course, with varying levels of tariff being placed by the United States on around 70 key trading partners. India, one of those, other nations too, who were hoping to have conversations, they now will not be able to have them with Trump returning to the United States. Of course, amid the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran. We're showing you live visuals now if you are just joining us. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on the plane that you can see in a few moments' time. The door will open. Terry, I'll come back to you while we wait to see Narendra Modi step down to be greeted on his arrival in Canada. Terry, Cyril Ramaphosa, the leader of South Africa, had a tense meeting with President Donald Trump, and further discussions were expected to be had. How impactful is Trump's leaving of this meeting and summit, given the fact that the US is such a vital trade partner to so many countries, and discussions were going to be had on that topic?
I'm tempted to say that there might be some relief on the part of many of the leaders who dread meeting Trump and dread the prospect of some embarrassment. Ramaphosa is an example of one who was recently in the Oval Office and and got not J.D. Vance, quite to the degree that President Zelensky was in the first of these outrageous meetings. But there will certainly be some relaxation among those who, among aides, for example, the Sherpas who have to prepare these meetings and have to sort of warn their leaders that, oh my God, he's in a good mood, he's in a bad mood. Now they don't have to worry about what kind of mood Trump is in. I'm interested in your coverage of the Indian Prime Minister, of course, because that's extremely controversial in Canada. It's interesting to note that there have been Khalistani lobbyists and groups who have been wailing loudly for the past week at least, since they heard of the invitation to Modi to be allowed to enter Canada when these Khalistanis, he has been playing the role of a murderer, he's been dispatching kill squad in the world, and to invite such a person to Canada is a betrayal of our values and so forth. They've been extremely dramatic, extremely angry about it, and guess what? A, Mark didn't bat an eyelid, and B, nor did Narendra Modi. It's a sign that one of the most acrid row between supposedly friendly nations, fellow members of the Commonwealth, that we've seen in many years. And now it's apparently under repair. They're going to put up a sign and saying, we're looking for a better relationship. There's supposed to be an agreement soon on law enforcement, exchange of information. That's a very touchy subject because just as Canada has concerns about the behavior of Indian origin gangsters and Indian diplomats in Canada, the Indians are worried about the behavior of the Khalistanis and the threats they constantly make to Indian assets, such as missions, consulates, and High Commission in Ottawa. And they want the Canadians to crack. It's a very interesting and growing issue between kind of the old and the new world, if I can put it that way, because the Indians, they say, you've got to lock up these Khalistanis. You can't have Khalistanis running up into Canada, threatening sedition and splitting up India and the rest of it. And the Canadians have for many years, oh yes, we can. It's not against the law to run down the street with a yellow flag crying Khalistan Zindabad. We want an independent nation called Khalistan. So there's a clash there, and it burst out into the open in harsh fashion. The two countries don't have high commissioners. In the other country right now, the diplomatic relations are in a complete deepest. So any warming up in that relationship will be keenly noted, and of course, really good for trade. The trade between the two countries is a pitiful, 8 or 9 billion. It should be twice as much at the very least. And they're going to try to do something about it. So they're setting up.
Yes, Terry, I'm going to interject. Apologies once again. The doors have opened on Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India's plane. You can see the doors are open. Handshakes are starting between diplomats. And we expect very shortly Prime Minister Narendra Modi to be taking those steps down ahead of his visit to Canada, of course, as part of this G7 summit. Very quickly, Andrew, I'm going to bring you back in as we await Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's arrival. Terry, they're talking about world leaders and their diplomats potentially having a brief moment of relief knowing that Donald Trump is not going to be present for the rest of this summit. Do you think that that could lead to the possibility of better discussions between other nations? We know how Trump held the stage there, his presence, his persona, his want and desire to speak to the media. Is this going to make it a simpler process for other nations to agree important bilateral issues and agreements?
Well, I think they will just be more relaxed.
Sorry, Terry, I was asking that to Andrew.
Yeah. First of all, I'm Canadian, even though I live in the US these days. I'm Canadian. I know what's going on there. This entire the entire episode is, to my mind, silly. Donald Trump is not an irrelevance, but pretty close. The geopolitical dynamic in that region is going to be sorted on the basis of the leaders in that region, not by Donald Trump, not by Mark Carney, and not by Kiritar, not by it. It's going to be sorted locally, and that's really, at the end of the day, all we need to know.
Yes.
So I guess I'm agreeing with Terry. I'm agreeing with Terry.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Terry, I will come back to you. Of course, this moment is a significant one. You've spoken there about the frosty relations that have been at play between India and Canada. Moving forward, this extension and invitation has been given by Mark Carney. Do you think that this can be a real turning point looking forward now between Canada-India relations in the face of such uncertainty with global trade?
Well, they put themselves under a lot of pressure.
Sorry, Terry,
pressure.
I have to cut you off. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, as you can see, has just stepped out of the door of his plane and he is now walking down the steps. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving here in Alberta, Canada, to take part in this G7 summit.
He was right there. He hasn't been to Canada for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The significance of this moment can't be understated amid global uncertainty. We've spoken about it all evening, but India's position on the global stage as an economic powerhouse, but also a diplomatic powerhouse, is clear. And Narendra Modi's been invited and accepted the invitation to take part in these discussions. He is shaking hands with diplomats and members who are welcoming him. 10 years, as Terry said, this is significant. Global relations at a point where there is so much strain, so much conflict ongoing. The opportunity for a turning point in relations with Canada, but also an opportunity to discuss trade with other countries as well. Although US President Donald Trump will not be present, other world leaders placed perfectly to have discussions and forge relationships moving forward. Narendra Modi, of course, not a leader of a G7 nation, but one of several world leaders invited at a moment of uncertainty. Mark Carney opened the G7 summit by talking about the instability, but the importance of world leaders coming together and being there amidst war, trade tension, environmental concerns, an advent of AI, a potential shift in geopolitics across several areas of the world. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi there to be a part of those discussions. He's joined by fellow BRICS leaders, President Lula of Brazil, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum as well. Andrew, I will come to you as we continue to play these live visuals to end this discussion. the significance of these non-Group of Seven nations at this summit. Why is that significant, and why is that important at a time of security risks, trade concerns, and also other issues that are vital in a time of geopolitical instability? Andrew?
This is not the post-Cold War era anymore. This is way bigger and different than that. And finding a way to construct a multilateral order that includes not just the G7, maybe not even the G20, but all the players that matter on the world stage is really, really, really important. And so to the extent that this might be a step in that direction, I think that's very positive and very constructive. We need, we had the Cold War order, we had the post-Cold War order, and now we've got this multipolar order, and we need to find ways of creating rules, norms, and institutions that stabilize that order. And to the extent that these powers are involved in these conversations, I think it's very helpful and constructive. The last thing in the world we need is just a few powers pretending that they're running the world, because that's not the case anymore. We've got, as I said, multipolarity, lots of powers, and we've got multi-alignment, lots of powers like Saudi Arabia, sometimes on Team Russia, sometimes on Team USA. They're playing the different game. We need to find a way of, again, constructing norms, rules, and institutions that can deal with this particular reality right now, not the reality of the post-Cold War era, certainly not the reality of the Cold War era. And I think we're budging in that direction. It's not going to be easy, never has been, but I think we're moving in that direction.
Andrew Latham, thank you ever so much for joining us. Also, thank you to Terry Milewski. We will continue to bring you updates from the ongoing G7 summits as more leaders from invitee nations continue to arrive in the face of uncertainty that has seen US President Donald Trump confirm his early departure. The ongoing situation in the Middle East, Russia-Ukraine conflict and trade tensions, all topics we will continue to discuss. We'll be back shortly.